Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where something just doesn't feel right? Maybe it's a simple exchange, but you're left with an unsettling feeling, a nagging sense that something's being hidden. It's not about the words that are spoken, but what's left unsaid, those subtle clues in body language, tone, and even in the silence between sentences. If you've experienced this, you're not alone. Today, I want to share how to recognize those signs, so you can uncover what's really going on. This video is more than just about detecting dishonesty. It's about developing the emotional intelligence to tune into the deeper currents of communication. I'm going to guide you through the first words or phrases a woman might use when she's not being fully open with you. You'll learn to read the signs that often go unnoticed, the shifts in her behavior that reveal far more than her words could ever say. Why is this important? Because it's not just about catching someone in a lie, it's about protecting yourself emotionally and mentally. By understanding these signals, you'll gain the wisdom to avoid being misled and the clarity to navigate your relationships with confidence. Whether it's noticing nervous energy in her speech or picking up on the unspoken tension in her silence, these small shifts can reveal a much bigger picture. By the end of this video, you'll be empowered to see beyond the surface and trust your instincts to uncover the truth before it's too late. So, why should you stick around? Because what I'm sharing today will change the way you approach every conversation. It's about being attuned to the subtle signals that give you the power to understand someone's true emotions. And that, my friend, is an invaluable skill when it comes to protecting your heart and making decisions that align with your well-being. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the art of reading between the lines. Your emotional clarity starts here. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. Now, let's get started. If you've ever found yourself sensing that something just doesn't add up, if you've been left with that inexplicable, unsettling feeling deep in your gut after an interaction, it's crucial to understand something. Words can be deceiving, but often, the truth has already been spoken through her behavior, her attitude, and even the silence in between. Before the words she says have time to take root, her actions, body language, and tone have already begun to tell a story. It's as though her emotions are leaking through the cracks, and while she may try to conceal them, there are subtle, sometimes barely perceptible signs that reveal far more than words ever could. Today, I want to take you on a journey where we will unravel those often overlooked, but deeply telling signs. The first words or phrases a woman might use when she's not being entirely upfront with you. It's not about fostering mistrust or seeing deceit in every word she speaks, but about gaining the wisdom to recognize the subtle shifts in her behavior that make you pause and wonder, what's really going on here? What I'm about to share with you is not just about detecting dishonesty in its rawest form. It's about developing the emotional acuity to tune into the subtleties that often go unnoticed, the small, seemingly insignificant changes in tone, gesture, or word choice that, when pieced together, paint a much larger picture. This is about becoming hyper-aware of those moments when something doesn't quite feel right, when the narrative she's spinning doesn't match the emotions you're sensing. By understanding these signals, you will be better equipped to uncover the truth before it's too late, to read the fine print in the story she tells, and to protect your heart from the deeper currents that threaten to carry you into an emotional whirlpool. My name is Celia, and I want to extend a warm welcome to you, whether you've been here before or if this is your first time joining us. This is a space where we dive deep into the complexities of relationships, explore the depths of emotions, and look at the subtle signals that many people overlook. Signals that can often be the difference between happiness and heartache. If you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe now because the insights I'm going to share today are unlike anything you've encountered before. They're powerful, they're transformative, and they could change the way you see relationships forever. Let's dive in and explore these emotional currents together. There's something almost universally telling about a person who is hiding a secret, and it's not always in the words they say but in the way they say them. When someone is withholding the truth, They often can't help but overcompensate by filling the air with unnecessary details. It's almost as though the very act of speaking becomes a defense mechanism, a way to create a smoke screen of words that distracts you from what's really happening underneath. The thing is, sometimes the simplest questions, ones that don't require much more than a brief answer, elicit the most complex, convoluted responses. You might ask her something as basic as, "What time did you get home last night?" And instead of receiving a straightforward answer, you're met with a story that feels more like a detailed narrative than a simple reply. "Well, I left at 8 because I had a meeting, then I went to Laura's house. But I didn't stay long because her husband was watching the game, so I went home. But before that, I stopped by the supermarket because I realized I was out of milk." Now, my friend, this is where things get interesting. When someone gives you all that unsolicited information, especially about something as trivial as a trip to the supermarket, without you even asking for it, it's a massive clue. It's not just a casual recounting of their day, it's a cover-up. It's a diversion, an attempt to fill the silence and distract you from the real truth. And while not every long-winded explanation is a clear sign of dishonesty, you must pay close attention to the energy that surrounds it. If the details are being poured out in a hurried, nervous manner, or if the story seems strangely disconnected from reality, that's a clear warning sign. So why does this happen? Why do people feel the need to over-explain? Psychology offers us some insight. When people lie, especially when they're trying to hide something important, they often feel a deep-seated need to make their version of events seem more credible. The more details they offer, the more they believe their story will seem solid, grounded in reality. But here's the trick. Over-explaining something that doesn't need that much detail isn't natural. It doesn't flow. It's as though the person is trying too hard to convince you of something, and in doing so, they end up giving themselves away. You see, the truth has a certain ease to it. It doesn't require this kind of elaborate construction. The moment you start hearing excessive, unnecessary details, coupled with signs of nervousness, like fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, or speaking faster than usual, that's when the red flag should start waving. This behavior isn't always intentional, and sometimes it's driven by a deep fear of being caught or a desire to protect themselves. But what it betrays is a lack of authenticity. It reveals the cracks in the facade, the subtle shifts in body language, and the inconsistencies in the story. When you begin to listen with a heightened sense of awareness, you'll notice that the truth always finds a way to slip through, no matter how tightly someone tries to hold it back. The key here is not to jump to conclusions based on one offhand comment or a single detail in a conversation. But when these moments begin to pile up, when you start noticing that the person you're speaking with regularly goes into overdrive trying to convince you of their story, that's when it's time to listen more closely. Pay attention to the words, yes, but also pay attention to the way they're said, the pauses, the hesitations, the nervous energy that fills the room. And most importantly, trust your intuition. Your gut instinct is often the most reliable guide you have when it comes to uncovering the truth. As we wrap up today's exploration, I want you to walk away with something powerful, the knowledge that you don't have to take everything at face value. The truth is layered, and often, what's left unsaid or over-explained is the key to uncovering what's really going on. It's not about fostering distrust. It's about becoming aware of the signs, understanding the subtle clues that tell the real story, and empowering yourself to navigate relationships with clarity, confidence, and emotional intelligence. The curious thing about projection is that it often catches us off guard, especially when we're not prepared for it. You're simply trying to rest, trying to recharge after a long day, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you feel this overwhelming urge to justify yourself. You begin to explain your actions, even though you hadn't been thinking about anything in particular. It's as if, for no reason at all, you find yourself defending something that, in hindsight, didn't even require an explanation. And there it is, the trap. While you're busy trying to reassure her, she skillfully redirects the conversation, leading you further away from what's truly at the heart of the issue. This isn't just a random occurrence. This is a psychological tactic known as projection, and it's something we all encounter at some point. It happens when someone unconsciously attributes their own feelings, guilt, or actions onto another person. In this case, if she's hiding something from you, if there's a secret or anxiety weighing on her, she may start lobbing these tricky questions in your direction. Questions designed to make you feel uncomfortable, to plant seeds of doubt in your mind, and most importantly, to ensure that you don't focus on what's really happening. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever been accused of something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't align with what you've actually done? Maybe it's something as simple as being on your phone too much, or acting distant when everything in your life seems the same as always. Or maybe it's a strange, unprovoked accusation about your behavior that seems completely out of place. If you've ever found yourself justifying your actions in response, even though you know it doesn't make sense, then you might be experiencing the effects of projection. And this, dear one, is the crucial point to understand. The issue isn't about what you're doing, but rather about what she's trying to deflect from. The moment you find yourself justifying something that's beyond explanation, you're being drawn into a distraction, her distraction. When someone accuses you without cause, it's rarely about you at all. What they're actually doing is trying to relieve their own feelings of guilt or anxiety by shifting that burden onto you. It's a clever tactic to make you feel responsible for something that has nothing to do with you. They want to unload their own emotional turmoil, but instead of facing it, they project it onto you. This doesn't make their feelings or accusations any more valid. It's simply a way for them to mask their own discomfort. And the most dangerous part is that, unless you're careful, you can get caught up in their game. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. So, what should you do when you notice this happening? The first thing is to stay calm. Don't let their accusations shake you. If you notice that her questions seem to come at odd times, or if there's a shift in her tone or demeanor that feels off, pause. Stop for a moment and take a deep breath. Listen closely, but don't let your emotions take the wheel. This is when it's most important to maintain control over your own reactions. If she suddenly asks, "Why are you always on your phone?" or "Why do you seem so distracted lately?" resist the urge to immediately defend yourself. Instead, reply calmly with something like, "What do you mean? I'm the same as always." This gives you control over the situation by forcing her to elaborate on her accusations, keeping her on the defensive instead of you. By responding with clarity and calmness, you not only maintain your own composure, but also keep the conversation grounded in reality. You're not letting her pull you into the emotional spiral of guilt. Projection works so effectively because it targets one of the most potent and universal emotions we all experience: guilt. It's a powerful weapon because it can make us question ourselves, even when there's no reason to do so. Once guilt is introduced into the equation, it's incredibly easy to start doubting your own actions, second-guessing your behavior, and even wondering if you're the one at fault. But that's exactly why it's so important to stay grounded. If you allow that guilt to seep in, even for a moment, it can cloud your judgment and cause you to lose sight of the truth. So the next time you're faced with an odd or out-of-place accusation, take a moment to pause. Don't rush to defend yourself or explain your actions. Ask yourself a crucial question: does this really make sense? In that moment, let the logic of the situation guide you, not the emotions that might try to cloud your thinking. Because if her accusations don't align with reality, if they don't hold up under scrutiny, then you're being pulled into a game of misdirection. And you have the power to step out of that game, to detach from the emotional manipulation, and to see things for what they truly are. The key to dealing with projection is awareness. The more you recognize it, the easier it becomes to detach from it. When you're aware of this tactic, you stop seeing it as a reflection of your own behavior and start seeing it for what it is: an attempt to deflect attention from the real issue. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, especially when the accusations have no basis in reality. Stay centered, trust your own instincts, and keep your focus on the bigger picture. When you stay grounded and calm, you deny projection the power it has to manipulate your emotions. The truth is always there, waiting for you to see it clearly. And when you stop reacting to the emotional distractions, you'll find that the truth becomes undeniable. Remember, the key to handling projection is not to become entangled in the web of guilt that someone else is trying to weave. It's about stepping back, staying objective, and asking yourself, is this really about me? If you can answer that question honestly, you'll know how to respond with clarity and strength, and you won't be so easily swayed by the emotional manipulation trying to pull you off course. The curious thing about this situation is that you weren't even thinking about anything other than taking a moment to rest, to let go of the stress of the day. You were simply trying to recharge. But suddenly, without warning, you feel this overwhelming need to explain yourself, to justify your every action, as if you've done something wrong. And that, dear one, is the trap. While you're desperately trying to reassure her, trying to make her feel better, she has already succeeded in diverting your attention from what truly matters. The real issue is no longer in focus. You're tangled in her web of confusion and doubt. But this isn't just some random coincidence. It's a strategy. A psychological maneuver called projection. It's when someone subconsciously attributes their own feelings or actions onto another person, deflecting their own discomfort or guilt onto you. If she's hiding something, if there's a secret gnawing at her, she may start lobbing these uncomfortable, seemingly innocent questions at you. Questions that plant seeds of doubt in your mind, that make you feel like you're the one doing something wrong when, in reality, you haven't done anything at all. These questions are designed to put you in an uncomfortable position and divert your attention from what's truly happening behind the scenes. Have you ever been accused of something that didn't seem to make sense? Maybe it was a tiny, insignificant comment you made, or something trivial, yet she blew it up into something much bigger. Or perhaps you found yourself justifying your actions for no reason at all, explaining yourself when you know deep down there's nothing to explain. If this resonates with you, there's something important you need to understand. The issue isn't what you're doing or not doing, it's about what she's trying to keep hidden from you. When someone accuses you without cause, what they're really doing is attempting to alleviate their own feelings of guilt or anxiety. They want to project their internal struggle onto you, to make you feel as though you're in the wrong, when in fact, the issue lies elsewhere. The most important thing you can do when faced with this is not to get caught in their emotional trap. If you notice that her questions are coming at strange times, or there's an odd shift in her tone, stop. Don't react immediately. Take a moment, listen, and then respond carefully. For instance, let's say she says something like, "Why are you always on your phone?" Don't rush to defend yourself. Take a breath, gather your thoughts, and calmly reply, "What do you mean?" "I'm the same as always." This type of response not only helps you maintain control of the situation, but it also forces her to clarify her accusations. It keeps the conversation grounded, and more importantly, it might reveal more than she expected. By staying calm and composed, you create space for the truth to emerge without falling into her emotional manipulation. Projection works so powerfully because it taps into one of the most powerful emotions we all experience: guilt. It's a tactic that makes us question our own actions, even when we have no reason to. That guilt can cloud your judgment, cloud your ability to think clearly, and make you second-guess everything. That's why it's crucial to stay vigilant, to stop yourself from being pulled into that emotional spiral. When you hear an accusation that feels out of place or doesn't add up, don't immediately rush to prove your innocence. Instead, take a moment and ask yourself, does this really make sense? In the end, words can easily be manipulated. They can distort perception, blur the truth, and make you question what you know to be true. But it's the small, subtle details, the pauses, the inconsistencies, the shifts in behavior, that ultimately reveal the real truth. If something doesn't add up, you don't need to rush into action. Just observe, quietly and patiently, because true intentions have a way of revealing themselves. The truth can't stay hidden forever. It will eventually come to light, and when it does, you'll be ready to see it clearly. Speaking of details, sometimes silence can speak louder than any elaborate explanation ever could. Let's delve even deeper into the third signal that might reveal infidelity: the silence before a lie. But not just any silence, the kind that weighs heavily on the air, the one that feels so charged it seems to scream louder than words ever could. It's that moment when you ask her a simple, seemingly innocent question, something like, "Where were you this afternoon?" And before she answers, there's that noticeable pause. You might see her take a deep breath, look away, or perhaps even shift in her seat as though the weight of the world just suddenly became too heavy to carry. Have you noticed that before? That unsettling pause, that extra blink, that subtle shift in her posture? The moment when she begins to speak, her tone seems to hang in the air just a little too long before words come out. It's as if there's a sudden tension that wasn't there before, a quiet moment where everything around you seems to freeze. This isn't just coincidence. It's your instincts picking up on the signs, your brain processing something that doesn't quite add up. You've sensed it, but now you're trying to make sense of it. And in that moment, you can feel the body betraying her. Psychology has long taught us that lying takes a considerable amount of mental energy. It isn't just about fabricating a story, it's a whole process. First, the question must be processed. Then there's the mental gymnastics. She has to figure out which version of events will sound most plausible. And once she decides on that version, she must articulate it in a way that doesn't raise suspicions. All of this happens in mere milliseconds, but during that fleeting moment, her body reacts. Those pauses, the subtle shifts in her expression, those brief moments of hesitation, they all leave traces. They are the signs your mind is picking up on, even if you can't fully explain why you feel something is off. That silence right before she speaks isn't just a random occurrence. It's the brain desperately scrambling to fill in the gaps, to create a narrative that doesn't sound out of place. Picture this. You're sitting at the dinner table, enjoying a peaceful evening. The conversation is flowing smoothly, and everything feels normal, relaxed. But then, you ask a seemingly innocent question like, "Who wrote to you so much today?" The smile on her face may stay in place, but instead of responding right away, she takes a sip of water, adjusts her hair, or even mutters, "What do you mean?" Her responses become a way of buying herself extra time, a way to gather her thoughts and smooth out the details of her answer. These little gestures, these subtle moments, are often where the truth hides, lurking just beneath the surface. It's not that every pause or every gesture automatically means something is being concealed. We all need time to think, and some people naturally take longer to respond, especially when faced with unexpected or challenging questions. But when that pause is accompanied by actions that are inconsistent with her usual behavior, when she's suddenly avoiding eye contact or fidgeting in a way she never does, it's time to start paying attention. Does she shift in her seat, as though she's uncomfortable? Does her voice crack or change in tone, becoming a little too quick or unnervingly calm? These shifts aren't random. They are the subconscious mind trying to cover up a truth that is trying to break through. When these signs start appearing consistently, it's a signal that something deeper may be at play. These small, almost invisible signs of nervousness or anxiety are often more revealing than any words she could say. They're not the kind of things you can always put into words immediately, but you feel them deep in your gut. It's like the moment before a storm, when the air is thick with unspoken tension, and you can almost hear the quiet hum of unvoiced truths. A wise man knows how to listen to silence. He doesn't always jump to conclusions or immediately confront what's happening. Instead, he stays alert, watching, listening, and letting the conversation flow naturally. When you notice signs like these, the best approach is not to press for an answer right away. Instead, let the situation breathe. Let her continue speaking, and keep your mind sharp, because the more she talks, the more she may reveal. A well-constructed lie can sometimes withstand the first inquiry, but with each subsequent question or moment of pause, it becomes harder to maintain. Lies have a tendency to unravel over time, especially when the liar is being pushed to explain further or is faced with details that don't quite fit together. The silence, my dear one, is never a coincidence. It's a moment that should never be underestimated. While it may seem like just a brief lull in the conversation, it is often the place where truths try to surface. Silence gives us the space to reflect, but it can also expose what someone is trying so desperately to hide. Listen carefully to how she reacts in these moments. Notice how the silence stretches longer than usual, how the words seem to follow more slowly, and how her body behaves differently. These are the things that can tell you more than she might intend to reveal. So, when you feel that uncomfortable pause, that hesitation that lingers just a little too long, don't ignore it. Trust your instincts. You don't need to immediately confront her or demand answers. Instead, just observe, because often, it's in those very moments that the truth tries to make its escape. Remember, silence doesn't just occur before someone speaks, but also in the middle of a response. When she starts talking and then suddenly pauses, when her words don't quite fit together, or when it seems like she's overly cautious with her explanations, something is at work behind the scenes. The key is to stay calm and composed. Don't feel the need to question everything she says or search for the truth right away. Sometimes, simply giving her space to continue her thoughts can cause the inconsistencies to become more apparent on their own. The real trick lies in recognizing that silence before speaking says more than any words could. It's the pause that speaks volumes. You may not always have to react or confront immediately, but by simply paying attention, you'll start to notice the cracks that form in the narrative. By letting her continue, you give her enough room to unintentionally expose what doesn't add up. The silences that linger in the air hold the potential to reveal far more than spoken words can. Let's explore the fourth signal, the avoidance of eye contact. This is perhaps one of the most classic and telling signs that someone may be hiding something from you. Now, it's important to note that avoiding eye contact doesn't automatically mean someone is lying. People can be shy or uncomfortable with direct eye contact for various reasons. But when this behavior is paired with other signs, it becomes a glaring red flag. When you ask her a direct question, and she looks away, shifts her gaze, or avoids meeting your eyes altogether, it's often because she doesn't want to reveal her true thoughts or feelings. Eye contact is one of the most powerful tools of communication. It establishes trust, conveys connection, and signals honesty. When she can't or won't meet your gaze, it usually indicates that something is being concealed. Interestingly, those who are consciously trying to hide the truth will often make an extra effort to avoid looking you in the eyes. While many people might naturally glance away when they feel nervous, those who are intentionally lying might shift their attention elsewhere, perhaps glancing at their phone, staring at the floor, or focusing on something else in the room. It's an instinctive response. The brain knows that eye contact can give away more than words, so by avoiding it, they reduce the chances of exposing their true feelings. But this behavior isn't always conscious. Sometimes, it's the subconscious mind trying to protect the person from being exposed. You've probably heard the saying, "The eyes are the window to the soul." It's true. When someone is hiding something, their eyes can often betray them. If you notice her eyes darting away when you ask something simple, trust your instincts. It's not just a random glance. Something is trying to stay hidden. Let me share a story about my good friend David. He once told me that he began to notice something strange in his relationship. Every time he asked his girlfriend a casual question about her day, she would look down or avoid meeting his gaze. At first, he thought it was nothing, maybe just distraction or shyness. But as time went on, he began to see a pattern. Whenever he asked her about something she didn't want to talk about, her eyes would shift. One evening, after an emotionally charged conversation about their relationship, David asked her directly, "Is there anything you're not telling me?" This time, she didn't even look up from her plate. She simply muttered, "No." It was in that moment that he realized something wasn't quite right. Sure enough, just a week later, he uncovered the truth. She had been hiding something significant. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. This story highlights the importance of paying attention to those subtle cues. If she's avoiding eye contact, especially in response to certain questions or sensitive topics, don't ignore it. It's not about immediately accusing her, but rather noticing the body language and understanding that it might be signaling something deeper. The avoidance of eye contact, particularly when coupled with a shift in behavior or discomfort, can be a sign that something is off. But remember, not everyone who avoids eye contact is being dishonest. Some people are naturally shy or uncomfortable making eye contact, and this should not automatically be viewed as a red flag. However, if you notice a pattern where she avoids eye contact only in certain situations, especially when discussing more sensitive or emotionally charged topics, that's when you need to take note. So, what should you do when you observe this? The best approach is to remain calm, composed, and aware. Don't feel the need to confront her on the spot. Instead, ask gentle follow-up questions, giving her the chance to either open up or reveal more subtle signs of nervousness. Approach her with curiosity, not aggression. A soft, non-confrontational tone might give her the space she needs to either clarify things or inadvertently show more than she intended. Now, let's move on to the fifth and final signal for today: inconsistent or overly detailed stories. You've probably encountered a situation where she tells you a story, and then repeats it or adds extra details that don't seem to fit. Maybe she's recounting a simple encounter with a friend, but suddenly she's telling you about the color of the friend's shirt, how the weather was that day, and the exact brand of coffee she drank. All of these extra details seem irrelevant, almost as if she's trying too hard to make the story sound more believable. This over-elaboration happens because when someone is lying, they often feel the need to add unnecessary details to make their story seem more convincing. The more they add, the more they hope it will fill in the gaps and make the narrative sound more complete. However, someone telling the truth doesn't feel the need to add these extraneous details. Their story is usually clear and to the point, without unnecessary embellishments. Take, for example, if she's telling you about her day at work and casually mentions the weather, the color of her colleague's outfit, and the time she spent waiting for coffee. While these details might seem insignificant, they're often signs that she's trying to reinforce the story and make it sound more realistic. It's as if the added details are intended to distract you from the core of the story. The truth, however, tends to be much simpler and more straightforward. Someone who's being honest doesn't feel the need to create extra layers of narrative. If her story seems rehearsed or overly detailed, it's a good idea to pause and think about what might be left out or hidden in the background. These little inconsistencies can be a signal that the story might not be as truthful as it appears. By recognizing these subtle cues, whether it's the silence before speaking, the avoidance of eye contact, or the overly detailed stories, you can become more attuned to what's really going on beneath the surface. The key is to stay alert, trust your instincts, and observe the small but telling signs that reveal the truth. I had a friend named Paul who was once in a relationship where his partner started doing this a lot. At first, it was subtle. He would ask her about something simple, like what she did on the weekend, and she would give him a detailed story. But as time went on, the details became increasingly exaggerated. She'd mention random things like the number of steps she took to walk to the store, or the exact shade of paint on the walls in a restaurant they'd visited. It was all a bit too much. One day, Paul casually mentioned, "You always seem to remember such odd details. It's almost like you're trying to fill in a script." She didn't say anything, but that comment made her nervous. Not long after, Paul found out she was hiding something significant from him. So if you notice that her stories are becoming overly detailed, or if she's repeating the same things over and over, it's a sign to stay alert. True stories flow naturally without unnecessary embellishments. The key here is that you don't have to jump to conclusions immediately. It's all about noticing patterns in behavior and seeing where the inconsistencies lie. If you detect that her stories are inconsistent or filled with unnecessary details, ask for clarification in a way that doesn't put her on the defensive. If she becomes uncomfortable or defensive at your request for more details, it may be time to consider what she's really trying to hide. Now, let's take a closer look at the sixth signal: changes in tone or speech patterns. This one can be subtle, but when you're paying close attention, it's a powerful way to tell if something's off. Have you ever noticed how someone's tone of voice shifts when they're trying to hide something? Maybe they speak in a higher pitch, talk faster, or even become overly calm when the situation doesn't match the mood. These sudden changes can give you a big clue that something's being concealed. When someone's lying or withholding information, their body and mind go into defense mode. They can start to feel anxious or uncomfortable, which affects their speech. A person who's telling the truth will typically speak in a natural, relaxed tone. But a liar might have a shaky voice, a higher pitch, or they might pause too much before answering a question, as if they're trying to think of a response that fits the situation. It's these little shifts in their voice that can be a red flag. Take, for example, my friend Jessica, who was dating someone named Mark. At first, everything seemed fine, but Jessica started noticing that when Mark was asked about anything related to his past, especially his previous relationships, his tone would change. He would suddenly speak in a much higher voice than usual, almost like he was trying to sound innocent or avoid suspicion. It wasn't overt, but after hearing him speak in this way several times, Jessica began to realize something wasn't right. When someone's speech becomes more robotic, stilted, or controlled, it's because they're consciously trying to control their emotions. The brain doesn't easily hide the truth, so when someone feels the need to hide something, their speech patterns can't help but betray them. If you start noticing any irregularities like this, don't ignore them. So, what should you do when you notice changes in speech patterns? Stay calm, but be observant. Notice if the change happens only when certain topics arise. If it seems like the changes only occur when certain questions are asked or when a sensitive issue is brought up, it might be worth exploring further. But remember, don't jump to conclusions immediately. Sometimes people get nervous, and their tone can change even without any intention to deceive. Next up is signal number 7, over-explanation or defensiveness. When someone is lying, they often feel the need to explain themselves in great detail, even when they haven't been asked to. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone is giving you way more information than you need, almost as if they're trying to convince you of something? This is usually a defensive mechanism. When a person feels cornered or caught, they may over-explain to cover their tracks. Let me give you an example. My friend Mike was dating someone who had been acting a little distant lately. One evening, Mike asked her what she had been up to, and she went into an incredibly detailed explanation. She told him exactly where she went, what she did, who she spoke to, and even what she had for lunch, stuff that didn't seem relevant. It felt forced, almost like she was trying too hard to prove she was telling the truth. What's happening here is that the person feels insecure and believes that by offering more information, they'll appear more credible. But this strategy usually backfires. Instead of sounding convincing, it often sounds like they're trying to cover something up. When someone feels they need to provide excessive details, it's a sign that they're worried about being exposed. You've probably heard this advice. If you're telling the truth, you don't need to over-explain. That's true. When people are honest, their answers are usually straightforward. They don't feel the need to throw in every little detail. So, if you notice that she's becoming overly detailed or defensive in her explanations, it's time to be extra vigilant. Now, let's move on to signal number 8, contradictory body language. Body language is one of the most reliable indicators of someone's true feelings. Often, a person's body will say one thing, while their words say another. For instance, if someone says they're fine, but their arms are crossed, their posture is tense, and they avoid making eye contact, their body language is telling a different story. In a situation like this, the words may be masking what the person is really feeling. Contradictory body language is a key sign that something is off. If you notice a mismatch between what she's saying and what her body is doing, don't ignore it. Her body might be trying to reveal something her words are trying to hide. For example, let's take a look at John, who was having a conversation with his partner about a sensitive issue. John asked her how she was feeling about a recent decision they made, and while she said she was fine, her body language told a different story. She was slouching in her chair, avoiding eye contact, and fiddling with her hands. John noticed the inconsistency, and it raised a red flag. Our body language is often governed by our subconscious, and we may not always be aware of how our emotions are being expressed. So when someone's words contradict their body language, it's a signal that something deeper might be going on beneath the surface. Lastly, let's talk about gut feelings. Your intuition is powerful, and it's a tool you should never underestimate. Even if all the other signs seem unclear, if you feel that something isn't right, trust your gut. Our minds pick up on small cues that we aren't consciously aware of, and those feelings are often spot on. If you get a feeling that something's off, don't dismiss it. It doesn't mean that you have to accuse her right away or assume the worst, but it's important to stay alert and trust your instincts. Sometimes, the smallest behaviors can trigger a gut feeling that something's just not adding up, and that's your brain processing all the subtle cues. Now, let's dive deeper into the concept of gut feelings. When we talk about intuition, it's all about the subtle cues your mind and body pick up on that your conscious mind might not even register. Our brains are constantly processing vast amounts of information, and sometimes we pick up on patterns or inconsistencies without fully realizing it. Have you ever met someone and immediately felt something was off about them, even though nothing specific seemed wrong? Or, perhaps you've been in a conversation and felt a sense of discomfort, though everything appeared fine on the surface? That's your gut at work. Gut feelings are built on years of accumulated experiences, and while they might not always be 100% accurate, they're usually worth paying attention to. Your instincts can pick up on nonverbal cues, like micro-expressions or slight shifts in tone, that can clue you into when someone isn't being truthful. Let's look at a situation from my own experience. I once had a conversation with a friend about something that didn't seem to line up. She was telling me one thing, but I felt uneasy as I listened. Her words seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being held back. It wasn't an obvious lie, just a small, subtle hesitation when she answered a few questions. Trusting that gut feeling, I stayed quiet for a moment and allowed her to continue speaking. Eventually, she inadvertently revealed a detail that confirmed my initial instinct. It wasn't a dramatic confession, but it was enough for me to realize my intuition was right. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Trusting your gut doesn't mean jumping to conclusions or acting impulsively, but it does mean being mindful of what's happening beyond the surface. If something feels wrong, there's often a reason. It's worth investigating further or, at the very least, keeping that feeling in mind as you move forward in the relationship. Now, let's explore another signal: inconsistent emotional reactions. This one is important because it shows how someone's emotions can sometimes betray what they're trying to hide. People who are being dishonest might react in ways that don't fit the situation. For example, if someone is talking about something serious, but they suddenly laugh inappropriately or seem overly upset, it could be a sign that their emotions are out of sync with the situation. Imagine you're having a serious conversation with someone about a sensitive issue, like a personal mistake or a miscommunication. If they laugh in response, even just a little chuckle, it might be their way of deflecting the discomfort of the situation. Or, if someone becomes overly defensive or angry when a simple question is asked, it might be because they're trying to protect themselves from being exposed. It's crucial to look at the emotional reaction in relation to the context. If their emotional response doesn't match the situation, it's a sign that something might be off. For example, if someone makes a joke about a serious matter, they could be trying to hide their discomfort, or even their guilt, with humor. This kind of emotional inconsistency can be one of the most telling signs of deception. Moving on to signal number 10, too much eye contact. While we usually associate avoiding eye contact with lying, too much eye contact can be just as telling. If someone is trying to cover up a lie, they may intentionally overcompensate by staring at you too intently. This is often an unconscious attempt to seem more convincing or truthful, but in reality, it often feels uncomfortable and unnatural. Eye contact plays a huge role in communication, but it's important to recognize when it goes beyond what's typical. For instance, let's say you're speaking to someone and they hold your gaze just a little too long, or even make a deliberate effort to stare into your eyes. It can feel almost as if they're trying to force trust, but in fact, this can indicate they're aware of the lie they're telling, and they're trying to project confidence. Your eyes naturally convey emotions like fear, guilt, and nervousness. So, if someone is deliberately making unbroken eye contact, it could be their way of trying to appear more genuine. But the reality is, Genuine interactions typically come with natural fluctuations in eye contact. If you're on the receiving end of an overly intense stare, it might be a good idea to observe it carefully. We're almost done, but let's wrap up with signal number 11. The story doesn't add up. This one might seem obvious, but it's often the easiest to miss when you're too focused on trying to figure out what's being hidden. When someone's lying, they usually have to create a story to make things seem more believable. The issue is, lies are hard to keep consistent, and over time, small details can start to conflict. If you've ever found yourself listening to someone's explanation, only to realize that certain details don't align, then you've probably experienced this signal. For instance, if someone's story changes from one conversation to the next, or if new details appear that weren't part of the original story, it's a clear sign that something's not quite right. Let's take this scenario as an example. Imagine someone tells you they were at a party last Saturday. At first, they give you a brief rundown of the night. But when you ask a few follow-up questions, their story begins to shift. Suddenly, they forget details they previously mentioned, or they add in new ones that weren't there before. This inconsistency is a dead giveaway that the story has been altered, and that they're not being fully truthful. By paying attention to these signals, you can improve your ability to recognize when something isn't quite adding up, and it will help you navigate relationships with more awareness and clarity. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this video has given you valuable insights into relationships, emotional resilience, and navigating life's changes with confidence. What have you learned so far? I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share one thing you're planning to bring into your life or put into practice after watching this video. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave your comment below, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this. Remember, your emotional well-being and healthy relationships are key to a fulfilling life. I'll see you in the next video.